messaged me last night. I guess he might have saw one of our posts about the podcast, or he just messaged me and say, "How do I get one of those NIL deals?" I mean, is there something? Is there anything a student can do to help their chance, or is it just a matter of where they're going to, what level they're getting recruited at?
I think you have two sides to the fence. If you don't mind me jumping in on a response there, one is the NIL money that will funnel to college athletes through the collective, right? The collective is that organization whereby alumni and donors are donating money for the sole purpose of divvying it out to athletes that are going to a particular school. But there's another side to that coin. Brands and advertisers can certainly now engage directly with a college athlete to endorse their business model, and they can deal with them directly and pay them directly. And those payments may be in the form of, a certain amount per post that they put out on social media, or to have a certain show up, right? They'll show up at a particular event that the business is running, some sort of engagement where the athlete is being paid directly. So if a college athlete has a question, how do I get an NIL deal? Well, because of the new rule with respect to getting paid for name, image, and likeness, you are now, every college athlete has overnight become a quote unquote influencer, which means that they can now be paid. So if you develop a brand for yourself with respect to the sport that you play and for the school whereby you play it, there's no reason why brands and advertisers wouldn't contact you directly. And we see it constantly, by the way. You don't have to just be engaged through a collective. We see hundreds of athletes, thousands of athletes, across the spectrum from, D3 all the way up to the highest levels of D1 that have individual deals with brands and advertisers.
Wow. So and I just want to be clear on that. So that has nothing to do with what college they go to. It wouldn't influence their pick on which university they choose. And the deal or the offer wouldn't be pulled if they go to a different school, or how is it just individualized for that person, direct from the company to the person?
Yeah. So if you're dealing directly with a company, with a business, the business can engage you directly. There can be an announcement, a PR announcement that you signed an NIL deal with Tony's Pizzeria, right? Local businesses like that. Now, of course, if you're dealing directly with a collective, the collective is going to you're only going to get money from that collective if you go to the school that is recruiting you, right?
Yeah, and that deal, correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, and I want to thank a gentleman that was talking. I was actually at a dinner Thursday night down in Philadelphia that had Bobby Jordan, who was actually the assistant head basketball coach at Temple down there. And he talked about the fact too that aren't these agreements between the student and the collective and not the student and the school?
Yeah, it's not the school that is going to be paying, right? So if it's not the school who's going to be paying, it's not the school who's going to have the agreement with the athlete. It will, in fact, be the collective, but it's pretty understood that, that collective is only engaging with the athlete because they're attending the school.
Yeah. Andrew, I know that, we've talked a little bit about that, about how the transfer portal is, fitting into this. Talk a little bit about some of the things that, you've heard relative to the transfer portal and NIL.
Well, and when we've spoken about this behind closed doors, I've said that I definitely want to educate myself more on this. I don't feel I'm totally on top of it, but I can tell you that the things that I'm hearing is it's not an equal battle right now. So one school or many schools at the FBS level can give some money, and then there are some that either don't give money, and there's some that give a lot of money to kids. And so it's not an equal playing ground right now, and that's kind of tough because the haves continue to be the haves and higher, and the have-nots, the ones that don't have as much money in their program, can be struggling right now, or, you know, between when you have the combination of the portal, you know, and where you're, you know, you got a good kid and you develop him, and then now he wants to transfer after a year or two. And now you have even the big problem of, you know, you do a great job recruiting, and at the last second, someone comes in and offers them some money and you don't, and then you lose the kid. So that combination, I think, is definitely going to make this very difficult for some schools to continue to be successful and move up the ladder. That's just my quick take.
Yeah. Hey, Frank, let me ask you another question too. One thing that Bobby talked about the other night was the fact that, you know, out of left field now, he's having to deal with like an NIL agent. You know, you have any knowledge of, you know, these agents now that are actually actively pursuing these athletes and then negotiating for them?
It's an entire industry that was born, and it's actually a scary concept that is very real. I happen to have relationships with many athletes, particularly those that are clients of ours. And I'm telling you, 1 week ago, one athlete that now has, I think, 13 Power 5 offers, the parents sent me a contract that an agent gave them that they were inches away from signing. And when I read the contract, I was rather appalled. I mean, the contract gave the agent complete and total latitude and authority over this 17-year-old's name, image, and likeness in perpetuity without any definition as to how they could even terminate the contract, and allowed them pure unilateral decision-making over negotiating with the collective or any other company that chose to try and deal directly with the athlete. So you now have agencies that are, you know, they're pursuing these young men at an age where they really don't have, you know, any sort of life experience or life knowledge. And the parents are now, you know, at a position where, you know, they're making real decisions on 17-year-olds. I mean, obviously, you know, we all see that happen as college players, you know, start to go through their maturity in their college years and potentially can enter the draft. You're seeing it from freshman and sophomore right now.
Wow.
This particular gentleman I'm talking about is a sophomore.
Wow.
In high school.
Well, I had a question here too. You just talked about the fact of this family now has gotten this thing from this agent. Okay. Where does a family or athlete go to, you know, say for a resource relative to this, Frank? I mean,
well, they're gonna do things like what this family did. They came to a trusted source that has been bringing value to their family. They're going to go to their high school coaches. They're going to go to confidants, and eventually they're going to go to lawyers. And, you know, they're going to have to lawyer up and make sure that they are being, if they're going to go down the road of representation, that they're being represented properly. And you know that there's going to be a lot of families out there that don't have the financial wherewithal to get the proper representation. And, you know, you're going to hear a lot of bad stories about this. You probably hear a lot of good ones too, but you're going to hear some bad stories over the next few years. Now, keep in mind, what really is troubling about this is this particular athlete, I'm using him as an example, had 12 or 13 Power 5 offers. Every one of these schools has a collective. Every one of them offers money. He's going to get the money anyway. This agent is going to take a representation of the athlete, right? They're going to take a legal representation of the athlete and then make like he's going to negotiate a deal that he probably has no real leverage to negotiate, because the athlete was going to get money anyway.
Wow.
So you know, you do have a rather interesting scenario that's kind of blowing up right in front of our eyes.
Wow. Very, very interesting. Frank, where do you see, you know, obviously we're in the infancy of NIL so far. Where do you see this thing going in the next year, 2 years, 5 years?
I think at some point there has to become some sort of regulation. The NCAA will have to step in and try and create some sort of rules, because it is certainly, the Wild West right now. And, Coach Andrew, you are spot on. A lot of these schools who are dealing directly through the collectives are holding on to their money because their best athletes, they're preparing for those athletes to be pulled away from them so that they can now, they have a pool of money that they can offer to keep the athlete there. There is no equality right now. There's no question that the schools that have deep pockets with respect to the collectives are going to do better in their recruiting process than others. It's no longer about trying to get into the league. Now it's about trying to get as much money as you can in college. So you are talking about, some rather chaotic times. And by the way, Coach, you brought up earlier about the possibility of maybe coaches benefiting from some NIL money. Well, why is it not logically part of the process where at some point these collectives will now pay the coaches to stay on staff, right? If an assistant coach that's doing a great job gets an opportunity to go and coach or head coach at another team, why do you think they would not be offered from the collective some money to stay on, right? Because the collective is an independent organization unto itself. So you're going to see a lot of insanity going on over the next few years.
The collectives, I'm sorry, just to
Go ahead.
be clear, is that what we would consider boosters in the past?
Yes, boosters are certainly, the major participants in the collectives, right? So, now they're pooling these boosters and, and putting together these funds in an independent organization that, can act, rather nimbly because, again, they're not the institution.
Yeah, and again, too, they're just not the collective is just not handing the kids some money because that's pay for play. There's some reciprocation as far as like something that this player has to do for
the
that money as well, right?
If I can add to that point, and just Coach, to your point, boosters in the past used to give money to the school or donate money to the school for certain things. In this case, they're donating the money directly to the collective. And by the way, there's a lot of uncertainty with respect to the tax benefits, right? Is that now a tax write-off to the booster where it was before? It is not clear that it is right now. In fact, many accountants and tax professionals are saying it is not a tax write-off. So that's another point where things are not clear. But yes, the athlete through the collective is supposed to sign on that they will, in fact, endorse certain products that the collective is doing business with, right? Certain business relationships that the collective has, the athlete may have to take a picture or two, may have to do a video, may have to show up at an event.
One thing that is clear is that the athlete has to pay taxes on this money that he gets for NIL. And I think that that's the biggest, message that I think that a lot of people, coaches, schools are trying to get across to the players here too, is that, this isn't just, hey, this is free, that there's some liability there. And actually, listening to Coach Jordan talk the other night, there were some horror stories out there about the fact that, because these athletes are still on their parents' taxes or whatever like that, because they're a dependent, that they've gotten this NIL money, and unfortunately their parents have to pay the tax on it too, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take another scenario. Let's say you're an FCS athlete and you play for Harvard and you get an NIL. And by the way, we all know that the Ivies don't give athletic scholarships. You can get admission scholarships, but they're not giving athletic scholarships. And through the financial aid process, you have been given a certain amount of financial aid. Subsequently, you sign an NIL deal with Tony's Pizza, and you're getting, $20,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. Now that directly will affect the financial aid package that you're getting from the school, and may wind up having you have that income that's coming into your family and may cross you over a threshold where you can lose some financial aid. And possibly at the end of the day, net you lose. So, there's so many facets to this NIL game.
That's incredible. I never really thought about what you talked about, that this NIL money like crosses them into another financial bracket for financial aid. But wow. I mean, how does that work? You know, even with like a D3 school, then if the guy, I mean, it's the same situation, right?
Same situation, exactly. So you're an athlete, you have a financial package that was based on some financial aid analysis, and you strike an NIL deal. You got your first deal, you're excited about it. You find out that additional income crossed you over a threshold and you just lost your financial aid. And at the end of the day, the money you got from the NIL deal does not make up for the cost of tuition. So there's certainly a lot of pitfalls that these athletes can fall into. And it's certainly going to open up, again, opportunity for lawyers and accountants. And, there's an entire industry that's being born from this right now, Bruce.
Can I ask a question about academics real quick?
Yes, sir.
So if a kid gets a deal and then he doesn't do his schoolwork and flunks out, can't play, I mean, does he have to pay the money back? How does that?
Oh, it's part of the contract, I guess.
Yeah, again, like those are all individual contracts. If you're dealing with an advertiser directly, that contract is going to be arm's length between the athlete, his family, and the advertiser. With respect to the collectives, my understanding is that there has not been a scenario where the athlete would have contractually obligated himself to give the money back. If for some reason that athlete is not playing the sport that he plays, whereby he got the money the next year, he is not obligated to provide any of those funds back.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Andrew, you have any other thoughts or questions here for Frank?
I guess I'll ask Frank, it's interesting. I never thought about the Ivy League. Now, we all know that the endowments in the Ivy League are second to none. First question I'll ask is, do you know, have there been any NIL deals with Ivy League football players?
I am not aware of any from an endowment or a collective through the Ivies, but there certainly has been a lot of talk. I don't think anyone has pulled the trigger yet, but Coach, I don't see how it does not happen within the next few years. It is just, it's too alluring to one of your top players, right? You're at Princeton and Princeton's vying for that Ivy championship, and one of their top players is getting some interest from a Power 5 school that's about to offer some money. What does that Ivy have other than the academics, right? Which we know is powerful. What do they have to hold on to that athlete, right? So if there's not going to be some introduction of some NIL money for Ivy athletes, they're going to put themselves really at a disadvantage.
I mean, you talk about a school like Harvard. I don't know the numbers, but their endowment is billions, right? Mm-hmm. So the money's not the problem. It's the matter of how they plan for this, But you look at it, I mean, their football in the Ivy League is, guys, Frank's has two boys that are playing Ivy League football, so he's very well aware of it. But they're getting Division I players already that say, hey, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. This is an investment for the next 50 years. But now imagine, if all these kids could go for free plus get money, that would raise their level of play to an incredible level, I would think. That any kid that can get in is going to go to the Ivy Leagues. Just a thought.
Yeah.
It seems like we've been kind of like talking down to NIL. Frank, what are some of the positives that you see coming out of, the whole NIL situation for athletes?
Well, I think that, as it develops, right, and like any other capital market, as it develops and there are some level playing fields and possibly some regulations, there are some amazing athletes, right? There are hundreds of thousands, millions of athletes over the time that the country's been in existence that are really capable of playing at the professional level and benefiting from the financial gain of doing it that never make it to the professional level. Well, you know what? Now there's an opportunity for those athletes that, for whatever reason, the 1 or 2% that make it to the professional side, the 98% that are playing and working hard and, doing everything that they should be doing to master their craft, they have an opportunity to financially gain. All right. It was only a year and a half, 2 years ago, where the only institutions that can benefit or that would benefit from the hard work that the athlete put in was the institution itself. And that playing field has now been drastically altered. And I do think rightfully so. You know, Bruce, you bring up a good point. We're talking as if it's such a bad thing. It could be a bad thing, but it also can be something magnificent for the athletes and the athlete's family. It can be life-changing for some athletes out there. It's got to be regulated. There's got to be some rules of engagement. And keep in mind, we all have heard the countless stories of young men that go into the pros, make a couple $1 million. They finish their pro career and they've spent and lost all the money, right? So that's with grown men that are in their 20s. What about these teenagers now? So there's got to be something that the NCAA looks to put out there to support, you know, the financial interest of these young men that are really, you know, they haven't gotten out of their thought process of just going to have, you know, a drink with their buddies or go and have a good time playing pickup, right? So, you know, they're not that far removed from really being, you know, adolescents. We have to protect them along the way.
Yeah, and I think that because the NIL is so specific to a school, you know, the value of the athlete, I think is going to be maximized. You know, hey, that's the best player on, you know, that Division II's team, and there's, you know, a whole series of businesses that benefit from that team being good, you know, related to, you know, concessions and, you know, you name it, in that particular community, that I think that these kids can benefit from, that they wouldn't necessarily be able to, you know, benefit if they, you know, got to the pros or whatever like that. So I think that, you know, because it is, you know, so siloed in its ability for these athletes to make money, I think that a lot more athletes, to your point, Frank, have an opportunity to maximize some earnings potential. What do you think, Craig?
I agree with you on that, and I do see the positive sides of it. I think we're concerned, and I always said, just like the transfer portal, I think they opened up a can of worms that they weren't quite ready for. To me, they should have had regulation thought of and set, you know, hopefully when this thing started. What concerns me are the collectives. You know, you got people outside the program making recruiting decisions now, going out and offering people money to try to come to your school. Some of them aren't even being recruited by the coaches there. And getting those people involved a lot more now, and where a coach can't go to school A and try to, you know, who's a starter at school A, a coach from school B can't go to school A and try to grab a player. But who's to keep one of these collectives from calling them, hey, you come transfer to school A, we're going to give you $1 million. You know, they hold the coaches accountable for doing those kind of things, but what kind of regulation do they have for these collectives? So that's concerning. I like the fact that I didn't know that they can go out and make deals, you know, just individual deals that were not based off of where they go to the school. That makes a lot of sense to me. I wish it would go more in that direction and maybe get the collectives a little more out of it.
Yeah, the collectives, I think, are, you know, just what Frank touched on, the fact that that's the old booster mentality there. And I tell you what was eye-opening to me is that statement you made, Frank, about the fact that those boosters, and when they gave to the college previously, it was a tax deduction, and when they're given to the collective is not. That could really, I mean, that's a very interesting development there that could torpedo, you know, a lot of this money. What do you, I mean, that's the single biggest thing to me that's come out of this, that, you know, like I said, not really sure what the rules are to the game, and you just dive in head first, and some of these guys might be left holding the bag.
Well, you know, to me, that is actually a good thing, because Bruce, you know, there's got to be some levers here, right? There's got to be something that controls that there's no, you know, there has to be some ceiling, right? And maybe there is a little bit of a built-in protection there. If a donor or a booster knows that they're going to lose that tax deduction, by donating into the collective, because it can't just be an endless amount of money that that any particular school can put together through a collective. I mean, you look at right now what Texas A&M is doing. I mean, Texas A&M is giving kids, you know, I mean, literally the lowest level player on the team is looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, I had heard, and this was brought up by Coach Jordan the other night at his thing, that the Villanova had actually hired a general manager to run their collective. I mean, that's incredible. That you know that they've hired, that schools now are hiring general managers to oversee, you know, that fund. That is mind-boggling to me. Any final
And by the way,
comments?
to Coach's point earlier, you can see a little bit down the road. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out now who's going to make the decision on recruiting that athlete. Is it the head coach or is it the GM of the collective?
I've heard that was happening already. Some collectives were making some decisions in the process. But let me mention this might be good for academics now, because a kid should go back for his senior year instead of going in the draft early, because he could probably make more money going to college than going in the draft. Does that make sense, Badger?
It does. I think that this was the question I was going to throw out to the panel. Are kids going to stay in college longer? You know, everybody's always in a hurry.
If they can make money now, why not?
To get to the NFL. I mean, I can understand being an early enrollee, maybe, you know, in college, but you know, when you got that meal ticket already, why are you like hurrying up and going to the NFL? Is it going to mean that more guys will stay in college longer, Andrew? What do you think?
I mean, for the most part, though, they're not giving the money that the NFL is giving. Maybe I'm wrong, but for the most part, and then you're risking, the longer you're in college, your health, you know.
The vast majority of players that are getting drafted aren't, you know, I mean, there's a rookie salary cap for, you know, a reason or whatever. And when Frank's talking about, you know, $100,000 for the guy to basically sit on the bench, you know, I mean, Texas A&M, I mean, you know, that's pretty crazy.
I think at this point, Coach Andrew is correct. I mean, what the rookie can get in the NFL is still more than what he may get in his last year as a college player. However, I think those 2 points are going to come closer and closer together. I am very familiar with a specific circumstance. If you don't mind, I'll leave it sort of nameless right now, but a Big Ten school who had one of the top running backs out there that they were trying to convince to stay. They offered a pretty penny for him to stay, and he did wind up ultimately making the decision to go down the road of the draft. But that was a very tough decision, and you're going to see that over time, those decisions are going to be harder and harder. And maybe at the end of the day, it does incent, you know, players to stay in school that extra year.
Yeah, well, I had a couple of questions, and this is more related to high school. I know that you know, Pennsylvania has an NIL for high school players. It isn't anything like, you know, the college or whatever like that, you know, but do they have NIL in New Jersey, Frank, which is where you live?
Yeah, the New Jersey State has approved NIL deals. It is a state by state thing. So you do, if you know, whatever state you live in, if you're interested to know if your high school athlete can benefit from the NIL, certainly do a little bit of homework. You know, you can also contact GoMVB at any point, and we'll be happy to help you as well. But yeah, there are NIL opportunities. They're less obviously lucrative, but you'll see high school athletes that'll be paid, you know, $50 to a couple of $100 per post that they put on Instagram by a brand or an advertiser, simply because they're an athlete for a particular high school.
Yeah, that's really intriguing here. And talking with people, as I have really over the last couple of weeks here, I've been kind of hitting the 7v7 circuit here with some of these schools. I think it's really yet to kind of matriculate down to everybody yet, but I even at the high school level, we have not even remotely close gotten to the full effect of what NIL I think is going to end up being. And that, would you say that's true, Frank?
I think so. I think we're scratching the surface. Keep in mind, again, as I said earlier, it just became active on July 1st of 2021. We still have no idea how far this thing is going to go, and we are clearly just scratching the surface.
Yeah, and and as you said, there's really no regulation on this. It reminds me of, like, speculation in the banking industry. I mean, with you just don't know what's going to happen out there, but you do know that there's ramifications financially if the wrong decisions are made.
Yep.
And that's the tough part for me is I just don't want to see anybody hurt in this process. Kids, families, yeah, that's a tough thing. So what would be your advice, Frank, to an athlete or family that's approached about an NIL deal?
Yeah, again, I would highly advise to make sure you have the ability to reach out to a supportive individual or a supportive group, whether it be an attorney or a professional, a business professional that has the ability to just kind of look at a contract and understand if the terms are really arduous and something that's going to give away any rights. I highly encourage any athlete out there that's entertaining an NIL deal, be very careful with the rights that you get, your rights that you worked hard for, that you give away to somebody else. So that it's certainly a positive. You have increased your earning capacity from the hard work that you put on the field and in the weight room and the training room. But at the end of the day, this is money is a grown up subject, and you have to make sure that you don't go about it lightly.
Wow, I think that's great advice, Frank. I think we'll I want to get everybody's contact information up here. Frank is at GoMVB, just a great organization there that not only it's a public relations organization, and I tell you what, just does a great job with everything to do with athletes. So good stuff there. You can see Andrew 570-428-2872. Coach Cohen, if these students or families are looking for advice related to recruiting, they can give you a call anytime, correct?
That is correct. I also want to make sure everyone understands, I work hand in hand with Coach Barrone at GoMVB. They do a fabulous job. I mean, amazing the amount of exposure they're getting for their student athletes, and it's been a great partnership. But Frank, is there a way? Because unfortunately tonight we don't have this up here. But what is the best way for them to contact you if they have questions, whether it's about recruiting, social media, transfer portal, or NIL? Frank, what's the best way they can reach you?
Yeah, all of our contact information is in fact on our website. If you go to the website, GoMVB.com, GOM as in Mary, V as in Victor, B as in boy.com. You'll be able to find all of our contact information there. We would love to answer any questions at no charge whatsoever. Coach Andrew and GoMVB, we have a phenomenal collaboration with Get Recruited. Probably one of the best recruiters I've certainly experienced out there and most knowledgeable. And we love to see athletes get to the next level. And there's this old statement, right? Don't hate the player, hate the game. We didn't create this game, right? The NIL rules exist. The transfer portal exists. We want to help athletes use it to their advantage and to their benefit academically, and athletically.
Yeah, and let's not forget Coach Cox, one-of-one life skills. Just a tremendous job in talking and educating people on what makes people successful, right, Craig?
Absolutely. And if anybody has any questions, visit my website, oneofonelifeskills.com, and my number's up there, 573-416-0829. Call me with any questions, and I'll get right back with you if I don't answer. There's my Twitter at oneofonelifeskills.com, or at oneofonelifeskills. Sorry about that. So last question I have, is it too late for me to come back and play? Because I'm sure I can sit on the bench for 100,000. I got 2 years left. Any coaches out there interested? I got 2 years of eligibility left. I'm very interested.
Wow.
You pull that off, I'm going to be right behind you.
Oh my God. That's a Hollywood movie in the making there. Coming back. Listen, I tell you what, Frank, very, very, very educational. Thank you so much. I tell you what, if there's a guy who knows as much as there is about NIL, it's Frank Barrone there from GoMVB. And really appreciate you spending some time with us, and I'm sure all of the families and students as well. So listen, we'll be back next week with episode 10 here of Get Signed and Succeed podcast about off-season preparation as we start getting into the summer. I think it's a perfect topic. And Frank, thanks once again for joining us, okay?
Really appreciate you inviting me, Bruce.
Thank you.
All right,
Coach.
gentlemen.
Pleasure, Coach.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. And we'll be